Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So in this video, we're going to be talking about how to set up your targeting when you're doing cold outbound, whether it's cold calling or cold email, more specifically cold email, to land, large scale deals, north of 50K and up. And this is, naturally going to come from companies with that sort of budget, right? So usually on the higher end of the small, medium business scale, if not the enterprise scale. And this is sort of how I think about it now. I've shown videos, I think one or two videos ago, where I just landed my client a 40 grand deal, so within that range. So I actually do this stuff, and this stuff is from personal experience on what's currently working, and always subject to change as the landscape changes as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. So this is the cold outbound pipeline framework that I follow every time I build a pipeline specifically for cold email for a client of mine, and how I adjust it. So the first questions I would be asking are, let's clarify what is enterprise, right? And again, why? Because these deals typically come from enterprise level companies. With enterprise, you can categorize it by revenue. You can categorize it by number of employees. I don't typically categorize enterprise by revenue, as startups with 50 employees or even 20 employees can do over $100 million a year now. It's 2025. So I typically look at headcount, because that affects, or that typically determines how difficult they are to target, right? And why we're talking about targeting is because, well, we need to figure out who to reach, right? Who has the authority or the veto power over these sizes of deals, right? We reach the right person, then we're about 80% of the way there. So now that we figured out what enterprise is, we know the kinds of companies or the sizes of companies that are likely going to have the budget we're talking about. And it's very difficult to get accurate budget information as well, which is why I don't target. Again, this whole video is about targeting. I don't typically filter by revenue, because the revenue data is often wrong. And we have data that gives us hundreds of companies that have been recently funded, and their funding amount and stuff like that. So we do have accurate data. But when it comes to places like Apollo, even in Crunchbase, places like LinkedIn, that data is never really 100% accurate. So we do it by headcount, because it takes a certain amount of money to sustain a company headcount. That we know for sure. So the next question I would ask, now that I know which size company I'm going for, I should probably move this over here as well, is what does their current outbound look like already, / what does their current client acquisition pipeline look like already, right? This is going to affect how I position the copy, how I position the offer. Again, the offer might vary depending on who you are. I'm just showing you how to crack how to crack large scale companies with cold outbound, and then you sell whatever you want to sell, right? But in my case, I'm offering to build pipelines on demand, right? Here's a totally new pipeline, usually cold email, and if you already run cold, so to get you more meetings, more leads, client acquisition. And if you already do cold email, well, then let's talk about how to optimize your conversion, because I doubt they have a framework that looks like this or all of these. So right, there are several things we can do. Anyway, so I would ask what their current outbound plus their current client acquisition pipeline looks like already, so that I know how to add value. And this is something you should be asking yourself as well. Like, do they already do what I'm doing? If you run a YouTube video agency, right, do they already have a content system? If not, then we're introducing a totally new way for them to acquire clients. If they already do, then, well, let's talk about how we can do it even better. Even 10-20% better at an enterprise level is tens of thousands of dollars in deals, like we just talked about earlier, right? So it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference. Even one client a week, or one opportunity a week, or one client a month. I mean, no. I'm thinking small and medium businesses now, but at that deal size level, it does make a big difference. So there's that. Now, once we've established, what is an enterprise company and what their current outbound plus current client acquisition pipeline looks like already, then the next thing I'm asking in this mental framework is, okay, so who exactly do we reach out to, right? And this is where things start to fall apart, and why a lot of beginners can't really crack enterprise level companies is because they're more focused on the offer, which is important, but like a lot more focused on the offer than the targeting. When it comes to enterprise, it's different. It's a different approach versus small medium businesses. To get to crack and penetrate enterprise companies, it largely depends on targeting, which is why this whole video is on targeting. Right? So locating the actual decision makers in this whole organizational hierarchy tree of people is the hard part. Locating the decision makers is the hard part. Enterprise, especially for cold outbound, it largely depends on targeting and timing. And those two things, those two T's, targeting and timing, matter almost more so than the offer. I'd say they're just about equal. Right? The next thing, and so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, because we're gonna talk about targeting, and that depends, or like that's this right here, right? That's this right here. So targeting at the enterprise level really starts to change with the industry as well. And so this is why I'm a big proponent of only going after industries that you know well enough. Like I'm talking like the back of your hand, inside and out. Not because, I can speak the language or anything like that. I'm sure you're smart enough to be able to hold your own when it comes to a conversation, or you can do the research. But it's about knowing the job titles and how they all fit together, and who reports to who, and who the decision makers are within an industry. And that changes depending on the industry, right? You must know the industry inside out, or regardless, you're going to have to play with the targeting. You're going to have to test it, but you're going to get bounced around. Like, you're going to get forwarded from this person to this person. I remember reaching out to a conglomerate. This is one of the first sales calls I ever booked with cold outbound. Reached out to the CEO of the conglomerate, and he, for an offer that had to do with the conglomerate, and he forwarded me over to his director of partnerships, which I wasn't really considering as a position and in that industry. And I hadn't even reached out to the director of partnerships myself, which would have been a good idea in retrospect. He just forwarded over my email to the director of partnerships. Nothing in the email thread. I found out after the fact that they had, in-person conversation, just telling his director of partnerships to check me out. And then the director of partnerships booked a meeting with me without even conversing with me over email. They just went to my website, looked me up, booked a meeting, and it was for a company I didn't even recognize. I come to find out that, the company I reached out to originally was a conglomerate. That's how I found out. And that they wanted to see if this offer would work for one of their holding company, one of their portfolio companies, right? So bounced around to a company I didn't even know that I might be working with, and to a person I didn't even know I should be reaching out to. And I never would have known they existed, right? So you're going to get bounced around, and we'll talk about this later, but this is why you have to have the infrastructure to be ready for this, because you're going to burn a lot of inboxes running into spam filters, trying to find the right contact. Your reply rates are going to be a lot lower than small, medium-sized businesses, because a lot of people you're reaching out to, what you're saying isn't relevant to them. They have nothing to do with who you're trying to reach or what the offer is. Spam filters and so on and so forth, right? So you're going to get bounced around, but you can circumvent a lot of this and skip a lot of this just by knowing the industry, right? So for example, staffing and recruitment is an industry I know rather well, because I worked there. I worked in that industry, and most of my clients are staffing and recruitment agencies right now. And those two things put together allows me to know exactly who to reach out to and where the bulk of our replies are going to come from. And so in that same breath, like how to sustain our deliverability as long as possible by getting a sufficient amount of replies and not being marked as spam, because we're sending emails to the right people so that it's relevant. So we're not getting marked as spam as much, right? So there's all those things compound. So when we talk about enterprise companies, again, this is just a mental framework, but when we talk about enterprise companies, I would say, all in all things considered, just not even looking at the niche or the industry, director level is the sweet spot for most offers. For most industries, director level is the sweet spot. Enterprise, so 999 plus employees. Director level. Now, if we are talking about niches like staffing and recruitment, contrary to popular belief, at the enterprise level, so companies of that magnitude, contrary to popular belief, and people will be mad at me, but I have the proof to back it up, HR is the best. HR and talent acquisition are the best folks to reach out to. When I was working at a staffing and recruitment agency, I was the number one performer at one of the number one boutiques in Canada. The biggest deal I landed for that company, which is one of the biggest deals in company history when it comes to revenue per versus duration of contract. I had reached out to a company, just a simple cold email to a company. This is a global mining company. We're talking tens of thousands of employees. And I reached out to a director. So not HR, a director. So there are cases where reaching out to the direct decision maker works. But then again, I had that person as a contact in my book of business, so it wasn't totally cold. We had reached out to them and, got bounced. Like someone before me, the account executive before me, had done the bouncing around already. Right? But at some point in there, I was dealing with a director, a regional VP, and HR. And I will say that 9 out of 10 deals, I would say 8 out of 10 deals that I brought into that staffing and recruitment agency ultimately came through HR if we're talking about the enterprise level. And I know HR can be standoffish, but listen, it is just, the facts just back it up. It's where the majority of your deals are going to come from. At the enterprise level, I'm just going to leave it at that, because if you know, and we have the data to back it up. So now, so that's targeting, and now targeting has there's a reason why this entire cold outbound pipeline is connected, because all of these things and each individual box, all these things feed into each other. And like something like this campaign strategy will feed into headcount and vice versa, which will feed into how you scale, which will feed into the infrastructure and specifically feed into the email provider. Right. So you gotta, if you have this, and I include this as a freebie, if you just fill out the Google form in the description below, just check off all these boxes as you go, because this works for any size business, but just focusing on enterprise. Once you've, you're not going to get this right, full disclosure, the first time around. Again, this is all about testing. Everything we do is about testing. I tell all my clients that the first week is just about testing and iteration. The first 2 weeks really is about testing and iteration. And so to not get their hopes up too high, but when it works, it works. When we crack the code of cold outbound, it really works. But it's all data driven. But I say all that to say, not to go off on a tangent here, the targeting is going to affect your infrastructure. Specifically, you're going to need backup infrastructure, because you will burn things faster at the enterprise level, targeting enterprise companies. You will burn things faster because you'll run into spam filters. I just recorded a video of how my bounce rates shot up to 5% they're typically about 0.5% to 1%. Because although we validated all the email addresses, we ran into spam filters embedded within the company that we're reaching out to. And that really hurt well, not really, but it did affect our deliverability somewhat. But we recovered quite quickly, and I showed how in that video. But you're going to run into things like that. More advanced spam filters. Just reaching out to people who have nothing to do with what you're trying to sell or your offer or who you should be talking to. People don't care to refer you to the right person because you're a nuisance in their eyes, unless you're reaching out to the direct right person, right? So you're going to need infrastructure for that, because you're going to be slowed down a lot. And that's what a lot of the smaller, medium, or the solo operators that I work with as clients, what they tend not to understand, and I'm just being honest, is they think they can skip the line and just reach out to the CEOs. Like they want my agency to just only reach out to CEOs and VPs and stuff like that, because that's what they're used to. But it's like, my goal is to get you as many of the right clients as possible. And a lot of this is about strategy. So let's put our pride to the side. Let's put our pride to the side. Put our ego to the side and do this tactfully and strategically. So there's that. Another thing to think about is how this affects offers, right? So we've talked about how this affects infrastructure. Now let's talk about how this affects offers. So where beginners go wrong, and I'm trying to deviate from beginner content. However, I was a beginner not too long ago. Where beginners go wrong is they do beginner stuff, like leading with guarantees. Hey, in the copy they'll say, hey, and this affects copy as well, right? But in the offer statement of the copy, they will say things like, they will say things like, yeah, like the typical marketing stuff, like we'll get you 5 clients with content or through YouTube or whatever, or you don't pay. It at the enterprise level, it gives off, number one, it gives off salesperson vibes, but it also, number two, gives off a lack of confidence, because you're leading with guarantees rather than this just being the thing you do. Another thing is they pitch performance-based offers, like pay per lead and stuff like that. And it's that takes a lot of management, from their financial departments and stuff like that, rather than just big picture offers like, hey, we have this tool that allows you to do X, Y, and Z, or we're in the business of conversion optimization. Because again, they might already have a YouTube client acquisition strategy, or a content client acquisition strategy, or a cold email or a cold calling client acquisition strategy, right? So there's that. Now, that also affects the copy, right? So a lot of the stuff you think matters in copy at the enterprise level does not matter, and it actually gets flipped on its head. So we talk about, nowadays there's this trend of shorter emails, and sometimes if you're targeting the right person, you can get away with a longer email and introducing yourself in the email and stuff like that. But typically 1 to 2 sentence copy you can get away with, right? With a lack, not the best punctuation, all lowercase letters, just to make it seem like an internal email to Dave from finance. Like you're sending an email to Dave from finance as if you already know him. Like, think about it that way. Social proof lines tend to work against you. Like, we just did this for X, Y, and Z company. Okay. They don't really care. Like, it's not like just saying you did it doesn't mean you did it, sort of thing. It's like not concrete proof. End of the day, if they, there's demand capture. So just, if they're interested, they're interested. If they're not, they're not. But also demand generation. And if you're trying to spark interest, which is demand gen, social proof lines don't really do the trick. I would just lead in with asking a question and poking the bear. But the number one thing is targeting, right? You have to be really intentional with the targeting, and what it has to feel like, that email, is, okay, this person specifically sought me out. And how you do that is almost the reverse, by saying, hey, I found you on LinkedIn Jobs. How you do it is just literally just as if you imagine you already know them and they already know you. You just ask a question, or you just make a statement and just leave it like that, right? So it's very, very, very simple stuff at the enterprise level. Again, I only say this out of experience of what's working with myself, and this is subject to change by the month, to be honest. But as of Wednesday, August 13th, at the time of recording this video, 2025, that is what's working and how we are getting deals like this for our clients. And I'll show some proof here. I've already shown this in a different video. There you go. 20% of this on the higher end is about 37 to 40 grand. And that is the proof you need. That was just a few days ago. All right, so I'm going to leave that there. Hope that gives you some clarity. If you run a B2B agency or business doing north of $20,000 a month in MRR and would like us to set up pipelines like this for you for client acquisition, just click the link in the description below. It'll take you to my website, and we can set up a call and see if the math makes sense. And if you'd like access to this framework right here that you see in front of you, just fill out the Google form and I'll send this to you via email. And that's that. See you guys in the next video.